The lantern doesn't flicker, it barely breathes. Down here beneath the soil and stone of northern England, you are not a child. You are a pair of hands, a crawling thing in the dark. Your shirt is soaked with the damp breath of the earth. The coal dust clings like sorrow, and the silence is broken only by the distant cough of someone too young to remember what air once tasted like. Your candle stub glows against the damp wood supports, casting a shadow too large for a body so small. You shift forward on bruised knees. Behind you, someone sobs, and still, the mine breathes. And still, you did. Could you have lived a life without sunlight? If this story haunts your heart or stirs your sleep, tell me, could you have endured the breathless dark day after day? Subscribe to walk deeper into the forgotten shadows of history, where voices still echo in silence. The frost hadn't left yet. It clung to the windows in ghostly veins, curling like the fingers of something forgotten, not outside in the hedgerows, but inside, where breath clouded in the morning chill, and little feet searched for warmth that wasn't there. You awoke beneath a patchwork of threadbare blankets, your toes curled under, your belly hollow with the ache of a skipped supper. Somewhere in the room, the fire had long since sighed its last ember. The hearth, now cold, offered no comfort. Only ash, soft grey, and patient, remained. Your mother stood near the basin, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hands red from yesterday's scrubbing. A kettle rattled with thin resolve over what little flame she coaxed back to life. There is no ceremony for a day like this. No breakfast, no gentle farewell, only the ritual of routine, spoken not in words but in worn motions. She lays a piece of coarse bread on the table. It's stale, dusted with soot, that drifted through the cracked window in the night. You chew it in silence, the grit grinding against your teeth. A finger tucks a stray lock of hair behind your ear. Her other hand pulls your coat around you. A coat more whole than fabric, its threads held together by 1,000 mornings, just like this. You can smell the lye soap still clinging to it, mingled with smoke and earth. She says something then, soft. So soft you're not certain it was spoken at all. A breath of a word. A prayer, perhaps, or just your name. Then the door opens, and the morning swallows you. If this story stirs the quiet corners of your heart, I invite you to subscribe to walk with me deeper into forgotten days. What would you say to a child walking into the dark for the first time? The street is not a street, not really. It is a narrow ribbon of stone, worn smooth by boots and wooden carts. Hemmed in by rows of low, lopsided cottages, smoke hangs like a veil, softening the crooked rooftops and catching in your throat with every breath. It is barely light, and still, the village is already alive. Boys not much older than you march with shoulders stooped and lanterns swinging. Some wear caps pulled low. Others walk with scarves wrapped tightly over their mouths. They do not speak. Eyes stare forward, dulled by sleep and soot. You fall into their rhythm without question, as though your legs have always known this path. Somewhere ahead, the colliery waits. Its chimneys already cough black clouds into the grey dawn. You can hear it, a distant clanging, like chains rattling in the belly of a beast. The sound carries over the fields, over the mossy stone walls that have stood longer than names can remember. It reaches you like a summons. Jonah walks just ahead of you, tall, lean, older by 4 or 5 winters. He glances back once, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. He does not smile. He never does. The road turns. The earth dips. You pass a dead fox by the hedge, its fur stiff with frost. A blackbird hops near, tilting its head toward the quiet shape. You step around it without pause. To your right, the pit head comes into view. Timbered scaffolding that claws at the sky. Rope pulleys creaking as they lift and lower carts of coal. Men gather at the entrance in clumps, lighting their lamps, coughing into sleeves. One sharp whistle cuts through the air. Then another. The shifts begin. Jonah slows. You fall in beside him. You ready? He asks, voice rough as gravel. You nod, though your stomach twists. He doesn't wait for more. He presses a lamp into your hands. Heavy, warm from his touch. Then he leads you toward the mouth of the mine, where the darkness yawns wider with every step. The last thing you see before the tunnel swallows you is the sky. pale and trembling behind a thin veil of smoke. You carry that color with you, pressed like a secret against your ribs. Inside, the light changes, becomes narrower. The air thickens. Damp, close. You feel it cling to your face like breath from something sleeping. A drop of water lands on your cheek and slides down your neck, colder than the morning frost. A man hands you a wooden tally with a number carved into it. You are told to keep it safe. It is your mark, your way back out. If you lose it, you lose your name. The shaft looms ahead. Jonah places his hand on your shoulder and gives it a gentle push. You step forward, your boots echoing on slick planks, the world behind you growing faint. No one calls it your first day underground. That would make it sound like a beginning. But here beneath the roots of Yorkshire's hills, there are no beginnings, only descent and the waiting dark. It gapes before you vast and black, not like night, but like absence itself. The entrance to the mine is no simple hole in the earth. It is a wound, a breathing, sighing wound, with timber bones slick with moss and age, braced by iron rivets that groan when the wind shifts. From a distance the hillside might look peaceful, even pastoral, a soft sweep of green in the misted morning light. But up close where you now stand, the illusion is gone, the earth has been torn open, and you are about to walk inside. Jonah stands beside you. He does not look at the entrance, nor at you. He simply lifts a lantern with a practiced hand, and begins the descent. You follow, your boots crunching on gravel, then squelching in soft black mud. The first breath you take inside the shaft tastes wrong, thick with damp and smoke, and the sour trace of something long dead. A narrow tunnel leads downward in a slow, winding spiral. The wooden beams above are scarred with pick marks and initials scratched in with knives. Candles flicker along the walls, tiny trembling flames that cast enormous shadows. Somewhere below, a chain clinks. Water drips in slow, rhythmic beats. The silence here is not true silence. It is a quiet stitched from uneasy sounds. Jonah hands you a cloth and gestures to tie it around your face. Keeps the dust out, he says, voice muffled. You do as told, the cloth rough against your skin, already damp from breath and nerves. The deeper you walk, the colder it gets. Not the clean cold of winter winds, but a heavy, moist cold, like stepping into a stone cellar lined with old bones. Your shoulders hunch instinctively. You begin to duck beneath the low supports. The ceiling presses closer now, barely high enough for Jonah to pass beneath without stooping. He pauses beside a wooden sign nailed to a beam. Level 1. No singing beyond this point. You read the words, mouth forming them silently. Superstition, Jonah mutters. Says singing cools the stone down. He says it like a joke, but he doesn't smile. Further down, the shaft opens into a narrow chamber, where a group of men gather around a rusted stove, warming their hands before the next shift. Their faces are carved from smoke and shadow. One of them eyes you, then nods toward Jonah. Got a lamb today, have you? Jonah says nothing. He only walks on. You stay close. Soon, the chamber vanishes behind you. The passage narrows again. You stumble once, your foot catching on a loose rail, where the cart tracks turn, and Jonah catches your arm without looking, then lets go. You pass a boy no older than yourself, curled in a niche in the wall with a candle and a ledger book. He doesn't blink as you pass. His lips are moving, but you hear no sound. A trapper, maybe, or a tally boy. You want to ask his name, but something in the way he clutches the candle keeps your mouth closed. The deeper levels smell different. Less of smoke, more of rot. Your foot slips on something slick. Jonah steadies you again. The tunnel curves. Your lantern's glow begins to dim. The air tightens, thick with the scent of wet stone and metal. Every breath feels borrowed. Here, Jonah says. He points to a small alcove, your first station. A pile of tools waits there. Pick, bucket, tin of grease. A wooden bench streaked with black. This is yours now. Stay near the brace posts. Don't wander, and don't touch the roof. You nod, though you're not sure you understand. He's already walking away. You look around. The space is barely wide enough to stretch your arms. The walls sweat. Your candle casts long, jittering shadows across the timber beams, each one groaning faintly as if disturbed in its sleep. Then the sound of the outside world finally fades. No birds, no bells, No voice from your mother calling you home. Only the heartbeat of the mine, slow and vast. You set your tools down. The pick handle is sticky. The grease stings your nostrils. You crouch beside the wall, pressing your hand to the stone. It's warm, alive. Somewhere far above, the sky turns pale with morning, but here beneath Yorkshire's soil, you are no longer a child walking to work. You are inside the beast now, and it has closed its mouth behind you. You sit alone in the dark, not the gentle dark of night beneath stars, nor the drifting hush before sleep. No, this is the other kind of darkness, the kind that settles behind the eyes, that presses against the bones, a silence so full, it feels like sound, a blackness so complete, it swallows memory. They placed you here, deep in the narrow gut of the mine, on your second day, gave you a wooden door to mind, and a small iron hinge to hold, told you when to open it, told you when to close it. That's all. You are a trapper now. The job is simple, they say. Too simple for grown hands, too dark for those who still dream. The air here is still and heavy, except when the wind changes, and when it does, it comes sharp, pulled by the suction of distant coal carts passing through deeper tunnels. Your task is to hold the airflow steady. When someone approaches, you open the door. When they pass, you close it. Nothing more. But the hours between, they are endless. You sit on a stool, softened by the ghosts of boys who sat before you. The ground beneath your feet is slick with soot and water. Your legs have gone numb. Your fingers curl around your knees for warmth, and your back aches from sitting still too long. Your only companion is a candle. It rests in a small hollow beside you, burning low. The flame dances just enough to remind you it's still alive, just enough to make shadows move across the damp walls, like quiet beasts pacing behind a veil. You talk to it sometimes. Not aloud, not often, but sometimes, when the silence gets too loud, you whisper names. Jonah, Mother, a dog you once saw in the village square. The flame listens. It is the only thing that does. Far off, a cart rattles on iron wheels. Then the sound fades. Then nothing. You count your breaths. 1, 2, 3. You try not to blink too long, or the dark starts to shift. Shapes bloom in the corners of your vision. Faces, maybe, or mouths that do not belong to men. Once, you thought you saw your sister's face, even though she died last spring. You blinked and she was gone. Only water on the wall. Sometimes the rats come. You hear them first. Claws on stone, tiny echoes in the pitch. They're bold in places like this. Some run over your boots, brushing your ankle like a cold kiss. You don't move. If you move, you drop the candle, and if you drop the candle, the dark becomes complete, so you stay still. Breathe slow. Your stomach growls, but there's nothing to eat. You were given bread hours ago, rough and grey with ash. You ate it all. There's no water. If you're lucky, someone will pass by before the shift ends and give you a sip from a tin cup. You hope it will be Jonah. He speaks little, but he never forgets you. You think about the sky, about wind, grass, the sound of your mother humming over the wash basin, but the memories feel strange now, flat and pale, like they belong to someone else. You try to recall the colour of leaves, but the candlelight is too yellow, too thin. The memory won't form. A sound, sudden, sharp boots scuffing the ground nearby. You snap alert. Open the door. 2 men shuffle past, hauling a cart between them. One nods. The other doesn't see you. His face is streaked with coal dust. His eyes hollow. You close the door. The darkness returns. You count again. Time slows into something shapeless. The candle grows shorter. You watch the wax pool at the base, dripping in slow rivulets down the cracked metal holder. The flame flickers once. You hold your breath. Not yet, you whisper. Please. Not yet. It steadies. You exhale. Somewhere in the mine someone sings. A low tune. Carried softly, against the rules. It fades almost as quickly as it came. You want to believe it was real. The candle burns lower. You wonder how many boys have sat on this stool before you. How many never left it? How many forgot their names in the dark? You hear something. Faint footsteps. Another cart maybe. But they pass too far away. You keep the door shut. Your job is simple. You are only 8 years old. But down here, age doesn't matter, size does. Silence does. And the candle is all that stands between you and the other side of dark. You lean forward, cupping your hands around the flame. Breathe with me, you think. Breathe. It flickers, holds, and waits. You hear him before you see him. A ragged sound, deep and raw, like a shovel dragged over gravel. It echoes down the corridor long before his footsteps arrive. You've come to know the sounds of the mine, the creak of timber, the splash of runoff, the hollow rattle of carts. But Jonah's cough, it is something else. It scrapes the air like a blade, sharp and hollow, as though each breath costs him more than the last. He emerges from the shaft hunched and pale, shoulders bowed beneath a shirt soaked dark with sweat. The chain around his waist clinks faintly as he walks, the hurrier's burden. He pulls the cart behind him, like a beast of burden, rope over one shoulder, the weight of the coal dragging across the uneven track. The wheeled cart groans as it moves, resisting with every inch, as though it too has grown weary. You wait at the edge of your corridor, sitting on your overturned bucket, your candle stub flickering in the stale air. Jonah slows beside you, unhooks the chain from his waist, and leans against the wall. His eyes are rimmed in red, his lips crack. Neither of you speak for a while. He pulls a tin cup from his coat and offers it to you. Water, still cool. You take a small sip, then hand it back. He doesn't drink, only stares into the flame. My sister used to sing when she worked down here, he says at last, his voice low and worn, just little songs, old ones. Mum's hymns, mostly. You say nothing, afraid the silence might break. She got sick, he continues. Coughed all winter. They still made her work. Said she had strong hands. He pauses. The silence returns. Buried her in the spring. Under the old yew. No stone. Just her name scratched into the bark. Another cough shakes his frame. He spits to the side, black against the grey stone. Sometimes, he says, I think I still hear her. Down here, when it's quiet. The candle trembles. You do too. A rumble rolls faintly through the rock. The distant echo of blasting or a loaded cart. Jonah sighs and begins reattaching the chain around his waist. You watch his fingers, rough, cracked, the nails blackened. He moves slowly now. Slower than when you met him. You remember the sky? You ask, surprising yourself. He stops, looks up. His eyes are tired, but not unkind. Blue, he says. Sometimes, other times, it's just smoke. You nod. That sounds right. A drop of water falls from the ceiling, landing in the dust. The mine exhales. He finishes fastening the chain, then places a hand briefly on your shoulder. Light, fleeting, almost brotherly. Stay close to the post, he mutters. If it creaks, move. You nod again. He turns and begins the slow pull of his cart down the corridor, the chain dragging like a tail behind him. You watch him go until the light from his lantern fades into a pinprick, then disappears entirely. Later, you see him again at the shift break. You both sit near the coal chute, sharing silence while others murmur in low voices, or eat what they can from battered pouches. A crust of bread, a sliver of onion, a piece of salted fish. Jonah offers you half of a potato, boiled to softness, still warm in the cloth he's wrapped around it. You take it without thanks. He knows you're grateful. Nearby, a man laughs. Another coughs, the sound like wet wood breaking. Jonah stares into the dark tunnel ahead, the next path he must drag his cart through. You follow his gaze, the long black mouth of stone and timber braced like a ribcage. You can smell the dampness there, thick with old earth and iron. He coughs again. This time, it bends him forward. Your chest hurts. You whisper. He nods, then shakes his head. Don't matter. You chew your half of the potato slowly, the warmth filling your mouth, then your belly. You try to hold on to it, that small comfort, but it fades quickly. The break ends. The overseer's whistle cuts through the stillness like a knife. Jonah rises with a grunt, reattaches the chain, and pulls his cart into the tunnel once more. You watch him vanish. You wonder how many more days his lungs can carry him, how many more tunnels his feet will find. You wonder if, in the silence of the mine, he will ever hear his sister singing again. And you wonder, when it comes for him, whether anyone will notice he's gone. It happens without warning. One moment, there is light, a small flickering oval of flame that dances atop the stubby wax, casting thin shadows across the beam before you. The next, there is nothing, not a flicker, just a breathless black, deep and sudden, closing over you like a hand. You gasp. The sound escapes your throat before you can stop it. Sharp, childish, afraid. It ricochets down the shaft like an accusation, slapping against the timber posts and bouncing into silence. You cannot see your own hands, not your knees, nor the edge of the door you are meant to guard. The mind becomes a coffin, and you, a whisper inside it. The darkness is complete. You stay still, at first, your breath shallow, your fingers trembling in your lap. You tell yourself the others will come, that someone will pass by, that another lamp will soon bob its way toward you, casting light like a rope to haul you back from this terrible, wet void. But no one comes. You wait. Time slides sideways. You do not know if it has been a minute, or an hour, or a day. You begin to shiver, not from cold, but from something deeper, the kind of shaking that rises from the belly, a ripple of animal panic that claws its way up through the ribs. You whisper your name aloud, then again, louder. It does not sound like you. You reach forward, fumbling in the dark, seeking the wall. Your fingers find damp rock, slick with something you cannot name. You place your palm flat and begin to crawl, slowly, one breath at a time. Your knees knock softly against the floor. Pebbles scrape under your palms. The silence is alive with your breath, your movement, your fear. You count as you crawl. 1, 2, 3. You speak each number aloud, like a prayer, like a charm to ward off whatever waits in the places beyond the beam of your candle. Your hand hits something sharp, a splintered edge of timber. You pull it back, skin torn, a thin line of warmth trailing down your palm. You don't cry. There's no point. You press forward. The shaft bends. A draft touches your cheek, sudden and cool. You follow it, like a moth to a memory. Then, a flicker, distant, faint, yellow. A lantern. You freeze. It sways closer. You can hear boots now, sloshing through wet grit. A low whistle, tuneless, cutting the air. Then a voice. There you are. It is Ellis, one of the older men. You know his face, lean, stone-eyed, with a scar across his brow. He says nothing more, just squats beside you, lantern held up high. His eyes skim over your torn hand, the dirt on your face, the way you tremble. He does not ask what happened. He does not need to. He pulls a small candle from his coat and lights it from the lantern's flame. He presses it into your hand. It is warm, soft, familiar. You clutch it as though it were made of breath. Back to your door, he mutters. You nod. He turns and walks away. The light recedes again, but this time, you hold your own flame. You crawl back the way you came, the shadows now dancing gently on the walls once more. The tunnel sighs around you, heavy but no longer silent. The world has shape again, jagged and low and wet, but it is there. You are not lost. You reach your door, sit on your stool, cradle your candle. You stare at it without blinking. Your hand bleeds softly into your sleeve. No one will mention it. Not the scream, not the silence, not the blood on your knuckles or the wet that still clings to your eyes. Tomorrow, they will hand you a fresh candle, as though nothing happened, as though you did not vanish, just for a moment into the deepest dark. And you will take it, because that's what is done, because you have learned what they all learned down here. The mind doesn't need to strike to take something from you. Sometimes, all it needs to do is wait for the light to go out. The weeks pass. You cannot tell how many. The days do not wear names down here. Time does not walk forward in this place. It circles, a roundness to the rhythm, as shifts bleed into each other, and faces blur into a single soot-streaked memory. You rise, you work, you descend, you return, and all the while, the air thickens. It clings to your skin. It settles in your mouth, gritty and bitter, like licking the hearth. You wake some mornings with a weight in your chest, as if someone has poured a sack of ash behind your ribs. You cough, shallow at first, then deeper. The sound echoes in the rafters above your bed. No one notices. You aren't the only one. Down in the shaft, the silence grows. Not because there is no sound, but because the sound that is there has changed. No more songs, no more muttered curses or quick footsteps. Just the creak of carts, the moan of timber, and always the coughing. Not the fresh, wet cough of winter colds. No, this one is drier, ragged, like the throat is cracking from within. You hear it everywhere now. Young men, old men, boys like yourself. One collapses near you. It happens as you are moving a bucket of slag to the edge of the tunnel. He is beside you, lifting a pick. Then, suddenly, he's not. His knees fold. His body hits the ground like a sack of coal. His hands twitch once, then lie still. You freeze. The overseer doesn't. Back to it. The man snaps, barely pausing as he steps over the boy. Another worker is called to drag the body out. Not gently. The limbs scrape the stone. The boots catch on a beam. You don't speak. You don't ask. Later you learn he was 16. His name? Maybe Sam. Or Matthew. Someone thinks his sister worked the trapdoor 2 levels down. You don't know for sure. His bunk is emptied by nightfall. By morning, another boy is sleeping in it. The silence returns. You begin coughing more often. At first you try to hide it. Turn your head, stifle the sound into your sleeve. But there's no point. No one listens. Even Jonah, who once offered you water without words, says nothing now. He walks slower, pulls his cart in silence. You hear the rattle in his breath and wonder how long he has left. You watch the older men closely, how they breathe, how they move. One wraps a wet cloth around his mouth. Another chews dried herbs. You try it once. It tastes like earth and vinegar, but the coughing eases just a little. They say it's the coal dust, that it fills the lungs, little by little, that it sinks into the soft places of the body and turns them hard. They call it the black lung, a curse with no cure. You sit near the air shaft on break, drinking water that tastes faintly of rust. A boy beside you, Thomas, barely older than yourself, shows you the scars on his chest, where a doctor once cut a boil. He laughs, but the sound ends in a wee. No air down here, he says. Only stone breath. You nod. That night, you dream of the sea. Not because you've ever seen it, but because your mother once told you how the waves moved clean and wide and blue. In your sleep the water washes through the mine, it floods the tunnels, and lifts your body until you float through the beams free of chains and coal and coffee. You wake with damp sheets and dust in your teeth. The shift whistle blows. You rise. You dress. You descend. Jonah passes you in the corridor. His lips are pale. He gives a faint nod, then disappears into the deeper shaft. You think to call his name, but you don't. Down here, names are like smoke, always drifting, never lasting. You return to your place. You lift the pick. You press it to the wall, and the mine, once again, begins to breathe. It began with a sound, not a cry, not a shout, but a low groan, long and deep, like the throat of the earth opening just wide enough to speak. The beams above your head trembled. The floor beneath your boots seemed to shift subtly, as though unsettled in its sleep. You paused. Everyone did. Jonah turned his head. Thomas clutched his pickaxe tighter. Ellis froze mid-step, his eyes scanning the timbers like a man listening for rain on a coffin lid. Then, a crack. Sharp, splintering. A noise like teeth snapping through wood. A section of tunnel to your left crumbled inward. It wasn't a full collapse. Not like the stories. Not death, at least not instantly, but enough to scatter stone. Enough to knock the cart from the rails and toss up a cloud of choking dust. When it settled, the smell came. It wasn't coal. It wasn't smoke. It was rot. The overseer arrived first, waving his lamp through the hanging mist. He barked orders, but no one moved at first. You all stared at the broken wall. A hole gaped where the support beam had given way. The soil there was different. Blacker, softer, and wet. Not water wet, but sticky, clinging, alive. The rats came next. They poured from the gap in a stream. Small, grey bodies, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, their eyes reflecting the lantern light, like glass beads. You stepped back, heart hammering, and behind them, the meat. No one spoke the word body, but you knew. You saw the curve of a boot, cracked and green with mould, the glint of a belt buckle, the yellow hint of bone. They didn't move the remains right away. The overseer called for masks. Men fetched cloth and vinegar-soaked rags. You were handed a bucket. and told to scoop. You knelt in the muck. You could feel it through your trousers, the warmth, the soft give. You tried not to gag, but the smell was everywhere now. It climbed into your mouth, into your hair, into the very breath inside your lungs. Jonah turned his face away, but kept working. Thomas wept silently as he shoveled maggots from the collapsed wall. One of the men muttered, "That's from the old shaft, the one they sealed years ago. Should have stayed closed." You kept digging. Under the broken timbers, they found more scraps of clothing, rusted tools, the corner of a lunch pail, long eaten through. No names, no faces, just fragments, just rot. Later they dragged out what they could, heaping it onto canvas sheets like coal waste. There was no ceremony, The cart was washed and put back on the rails. You were given a slice of turnip and a hunk of bread as reward for the cleanup. You ate it in silence, sitting beside Jonah beneath the bracing post. Neither of you spoke. Then someone handed you half an onion. You hadn't tasted anything so sweet in months. You peeled it slowly, savoring each bite, letting the sting fill your mouth and nose until the smell of the rot was chased from your tongue. You sat there chewing, while Thomas scrubbed dried blood from the stone with a rag that once belonged to his father. A rat ran past. The overseer shouted for the next shift, and the mine, without pause, resumed its breathing. You returned to your post, the onion skin still in your hand, and placed it gently in your pocket. A trophy, a remembrance, a comfort. This, you realized, was what passed for victory down here. Not escape, not light, not even silence. Just half an onion, and a little less rot in the air than yesterday. It began like every other morning, with silence and stone. You descended with the rest, boots scuffing against the damp slats, hands curled against the cold. The lantern swung from your belt, casting ribbons of amber light against the wall. The air felt thicker that day, heavier, somehow, as if the mine had drawn a long breath and forgotten to let it go. Jonah was already below, hunched over his cart. Ellis nodded to you once before vanishing down his shaft. Thomas offered half a biscuit before tucking it away for later. It was an ordinary day in a place where no day was truly different. But the silence was wrong. It wasn't the usual hush, the kind stitched together by coal dust and exhaustion. No, this was the kind of silence that crackled. A silence waiting for a shape, waiting to break. You were near the junction of the East Tunnel when it happened. The whistle had just been blown. The next shift moving into place, you heard a voice shout something, muffled, garbled, and then a roar. Not of fire, not of wind, but of falling. The world cracked. It wasn't just a noise. It was a sensation. The floor moved beneath you. The timbers groaned like dying trees. Dust exploded into the air in a choking wave. You were thrown sideways, your shoulder slamming into the wall. Your candle went out. The mine became a heartbeat of sound, crashing, crunching, the dull thud of something heavy hitting something soft. Then silence. Not the silence of breath held, but the silence of breath gone. You lay still, blinking into the dark. The air was thick with dust. You could not see your hand in front of your face. You coughed once, then again. Each breath cut into your throat like gravel. You called out. No one answered. You listened. Then, faintly, a moan. You scrambled to your knees, one hand pressed to the wall for balance. You moved slowly, feeling your way forward. You found a beam, snapped, wet. Your fingers came away red. The light came next. A flicker from behind. Someone's lantern still burned. You turned. It was Thomas. He was limping, holding the lamp aloft with shaking fingers. You followed the light. Together you found Jonah. He was pinned. A beam had fallen across his legs. He was awake. Barely. His eyes fluttered. Blood trickled from his mouth. His breath came in short, broken gulps. He looked at you, tried to speak. The words didn't come. You didn't cry. You couldn't. Thomas stood behind you, whispering prayers. You tried to lift the beam. It didn't budge. Others came. 2 men, 1 boy, a figure with a shovel. They spoke in low voices. They tried to pull Jonah free. His body jerked once, then stilled. A man placed his hand over Jonah's face and closed his eyes. No one said his name. No one asked if he had family. They left his body there while they cleared the rest. 3 men were missing. One boy, barely 9, was found hours later, crushed beneath a slab of shale. You helped carry the bodies to the lift. You did not speak. You did not blink. Your hand still held the stub of your broken candle. The overseer marked names in his ledger. "Shift resumes in 2 hours," he said. No one objected. You returned to your shaft. You sat where the air was thinnest and stared at the coal seam. It stared back. In the distance, the wind howled through the surface shaft. The earth had groaned. The mine had spoken. And you had listened. You knew now what it sounded like when the bones of the world broke. You knew what it meant to be buried alive, and still be breathing. It was evening in the mine, though such a thing could only be known by the change in rhythm, the shift in footsteps. The way the carts rolled slower, the voices quieter, rougher at the edges. Light did not change in the mine. The walls did not soften. There were no sunsets, only failing candles and aching limbs. You were 10 now, or near enough. The days no longer counted forward, only downward. Your hands had thickened, not with strength but with callous. Your back bowed ever so slightly from the constant stoop. The dust had found a home beneath your fingernails, and in the creases of your neck. You no longer coughed it out. It had become a part of you. That evening you were moving down one of the lower shafts with your lantern. The floor was slick with runoff, the air damp with the weight of 12 hours of breathing bodies and burning oil. The light from your lantern shimmered against the walls like a trembling pulse, and then your foot slipped. It was just a small rock, an innocent thing, but your boot turned sideways, your weight tipped, and your hands flew out, one catching the beam, the other releasing the lantern. It fell. The sound it made when it hit the stone floor was not loud, not even sharp, just a dull clink, glass breaking, oil spilling, flame vanishing. And then it was dark, not the kind of dark that waits, the kind that bites. You stood there, frozen. Your heart beat loud against your ribs. You could hear the mine around you, creaks, groans, distant coughs. But in your small circle of the world, there was only black. You reached down, fingers trembling, searching for the broken shape. But there was nothing to be saved. Your lantern was gone. And worse, it had been yours to carry, yours to protect. You knew what that meant. Punishment. Not the kind written on paper, not the kind measured in days, but the kind given by calloused hands, and a leather strap hung by the shaft door. You sat in the darkness for a long while, unsure what part of your body was colder, your hands or your heart. Eventually you rose. You walked without light. Your hands brushed the beams. Your boots shuffled slowly, careful of loose stones and slippery moss. Every creak became a warning. Every whisper of wind against the wall made your chest tighten. It took half an hour to reach the surface shaft. The overseer stood there, oil lamp in hand, his face carved from coal and iron. He looked at you once, then at your empty hands. His expression didn't change. He raised the strap. You did not beg. The first strike hit your back, the second found your thigh, the third your shoulder. You did not cry. You did not blink. When it was over, he handed you another lantern. "Don't drop this one." That was all he said. You turned and walked back into the shaft. The new lantern felt heavier. You carried it with both hands. Later, when your shift ended, you walked home slowly, your legs burning from the lashes. Your coat hung crooked from your shoulders. The evening fog rolled over the village in soft, damp folds. Your breath hung in the air like mist. At the cottage, your mother didn't ask about the bruise on your cheek or the torn edge of your sleeve. She only stirred the pot and said, "Sit." You sat. She handed you a bowl of broth, thin, salted, warm. You held it between your palms for a long while before drinking. She braided your hair as you ate, gently, like she used to when you were very small. Her fingers moved without sound. When she finished, she whispered something near your ear. You did not catch the words, but the warmth of them stayed with you, even as you climbed into your blanket and let sleep take you. That night, you dreamed of light. Not lantern light, not fire, but sunlight, high, golden, clean. It felt like something you once knew. The mine was still, not dead. Never that. The air shafts still moaned with shifting wind, and the timbers creaked like old bones settling into sleep. But on Sundays the pit did not hunger. The carts did not roll. The whistles did not scream. You woke slowly that morning. The aches were still there, a quiet choir in your limbs, but they did not press as sharply. The lashes from the overseer's strap still burned across your thigh, faded now into plum-coloured welts, but the shift bell did not ring, and for once, you stayed in bed. The sun had risen, though you could not see it from your cot. But you could feel it, a slight change in the warmth of the air, the golden sheen that slipped through the thin curtain nailed to the cottage wall. A hush lay over the village, different from the mine's silence. This one was gentle, a lull, a breath between storms. Your mother stirred at the hearth, the spoon tapping against the pot. She hummed, just a little, some tune from the old country, one passed down through braids and bread in quiet hands. It filled the air like steam. After breakfast, a single boiled egg shared between the two of you. She sent you outside. You need the air, she said. You stepped into the yard, blinking. The light startled you. Not because it was bright, but because it was soft. There was no edge to it, no smoke to catch in your throat, just sun and breeze, and the strange rustle of leaves. You sat in the grass behind the cottage, near the stone fence overgrown with moss. The blades tickled your ankles. A beetle crawled across your boot, undisturbed by the calluses that made you seem older than your years. Above you, the clouds drifted, great white whales in a pale sea. You lay back slowly, and for the first time in weeks you breathed without dust. The scent of heather mixed with old wood and chimney soot. A dog barked in the distance. A church bell rang 3 slow notes from the hilltop. You stared at the branches overhead and tried to remember their names. Birch, elm, rowan. You'd once known these things. You were sure of it, but the mine had hollowed out parts of you. Places where knowledge had lived, where curiosity had nestled. Now, only shadows remained. A bee buzzed past your ear. You flinched, then laughed, quietly, the sound foreign on your own tongue. The hours passed in pieces. Later your mother called you in. She had drawn a basin of cold water and scrubbed your shirt, hanging it by the fire to dry. She motioned for you to sit. You did. She took a comb from the windowsill, the one your sister used to hold. With slow hands, she braided your hair, tugging gently to undo the knots. Her fingers were rough, but tender, each pull a wordless apology. She did not speak of the mine, neither did you. But in her silence was a kind of knowing, a mourning, a prayer, not offered to heaven, but to the quiet between moments. That night, after your supper, thin stew, thickened with flour and memory, you climbed into your cot and pulled the blanket over your legs. You stared at the ceiling, watching the candlelight flicker against the beams. And when you finally closed your eyes, the darkness was not cruel. It was soft. And in your sleep you dreamed again, not of shafts or stone or flame, but of air, clean, wide air, and your lungs filled with it, again and again, as though they were learning how to live. The day began as they all did, with descent. You stepped into the lift cage with the others, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, the stink of oil and flannel heavy in the air. The rope above groaned as the wheels turned, and the platform creaked downward into the black mouth of the mine. Lanterns swung from hooks, casting tremulous halos that made the wooden beams above flicker like ribs in a dying body. You didn't speak. None of you did. Voices have no place here. You'd learnt long ago that silence was safer. At the bottom, the shaft greeted you with its familiar breath, stale, damp and thick with memory. You moved with practiced steps through the narrow corridor, ducking beneath low beams, your eyes fixed on the glow ahead. You passed Jonah's old corner. It had been Phil, a new boy now crouched there, too young, with eyes too wide. Ellis was already in the lower tunnel. He worked with the quiet focus of someone who knew how little the world cared for haste or pain. You joined him. Together you chipped at the coal seam, iron picks ringing against the stone in a rhythm older than song. Time blurred. You'd long since stopped marking hours by the sun. Instead, you measured by the way your limbs burned, the weight in your chest, the stiffness in your spine. You stopped only when the foreman's whistle echoed through the shaft. You sat for your break near the air shaft, sharing a crust of bread with Ellis and another lad named Rue. The 3 of you spoke little, chewing in rhythm, your faces smudged with dust, and then a sound, a hiss, sharp, followed by a crack, not of wood, but of something hotter. You turned your head. A shaft to the west, one barely reinforced, flared orange. Not the pale flicker of a lantern. No, this was fire. Pure and fast. A flash of it tore through the dark like a whip. Then the mine screamed. The explosion came a breath later. A deep, muffled boom that rippled through the earth like thunder trapped in stone. The tunnel trembled. Dust poured from the ceiling in great grey clouds. The air turned thick, impossible to breathe. You dropped flat as debris rained down. Slivers of wood, flecks of coal, a shoe, voices erupted, men shouting. Someone cried for help. Another wept, openly. You couldn't see more than a foot ahead. The fire had died back, but the smoke was worse. Black and heavy, rolling through the shaft in slow waves. You tied your kerchief around your nose, coughed hard, and rose to your knees. The tunnel ahead was gone, collapsed, timbers splintered like broken bones. Ellis was dragging Rue by the collar, the boy's leg limp behind him. You grabbed Rue's arm, helped carry him to the bracing post, away from the worst of the smoke. The boy's face was pale, eyes rolled back, mouth moving with no sound. You pressed your sleeve to his nose. Waited. He breathed, just barely. Others emerged from the gloom, faces smeared black, eyes wild. Some carried stretchers, others carried nothing. The overseer's voice cracked through the chaos, barking names, orders, curses. He did not look toward the fire. He only shouted for the lift to be lowered. You waited your turn. When it came, you stepped into the lift again. Rue slumped between you and Ellis. You rose through smoke, into grey sky, into cold, into air. The surface felt unreal, the wind too clean, the sky too wide. You blinked against it, your lungs confused by the absence of dust. They laid the bodies in rows. 4 of them. One still burned. His boots were untouched, charred feet sticking out from beneath soot-covered trousers. No names were said. Someone recited a verse too quickly to feel real. Later, in the chapel, candles were lit. The smell of scorched hair lingered on your coat. That night, you sat on the edge of your bed and stared at your hands. They trembled. Your mother didn't ask. She only lit a candle on the table, the same way the priest had done. And in the flicker of that small, steady flame, you watched the fire again, bursting through the shaft like a demon, fast as breath, loud as death. You did not sleep. You would not for many nights, because in the mine, fire is not a light. It is a mouth, and once it opens, it never truly closes. The chapel bell rang 4 times that morning, not the crisp, clean toll of Sunday service, but slow, heavy chimes that rolled through the valley like morning itself. 1 ring for each man lost, 4 hearts stilled, 4 names written in the ledger of the mine, 4 homes now missing a voice at the table. You heard it from the hillside as you walked. Your legs ached from the previous night. The scent of smoke still clung to your sleeves. The sky hung low, swollen with the kind of grey that promised neither rain nor light. By the chapel gate, people gathered. Not many. Not enough. The colliery manager stood near the steps, hat in hand, coat too clean for grief. Beside him, the priest read softly from a worn book, his words lost in the wind. And then her. She stood a few paces apart from the others, wrapped in black, her shawl fluttering like a mourning flag. Her face was pale, too pale. Her eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking. One hand rested on the shoulder of a small girl beside her, no older than you had been when you first entered the pit. The girl clutched a wooden doll. Its face was worn smooth from fingers, the kind of wear that only grief can bring. She held it tightly, as if it could anchor her in a world that no longer made sense. Jonah, who once stood beside you in those dark corridors, had known the man. The girl's father spoke of him once, said he was kind, said he always shared his tea, said he was too good for this place. Now he was beneath it. And the girl had no name to you, only the image, her eyes wide, her lips pressed tight, the doll limp in her arms. You wondered if she understood what had happened, if she knew that the man who had once lifted her into the air would never lift anything again. The priest closed his book. No one clapped. No one sang. The wind did the speaking, rattling the chapel door and rustling the ash trees behind the graves. You watched as the widow turned and walked away, her steps measured, the girl silent at her side. Neither of them cried. Perhaps they had done that already. Perhaps the tears had dried the moment the fire came. You thought of your mother, of how she looked when your sister passed the previous winter. Not loud with grief, but hollowed out, like bread left too long in the oven. A crack, not a shatter. That was how women broke here, quietly. You stayed at the graveyard longer than most, walked between the stones. Some had names, some did not. Many were marked only with initials, or years worn down by the wind. You knelt by one, finger tracing a letter you couldn't read. The earth was still soft. There would be more graves by winter's end. Back in the village, life went on. Laundry flapped on lines. Children played with sticks in the dirt. A cart rolled by, wheels creaking beneath sacks of flour. You passed the cottage where the widow lived. The curtains were drawn. A small pair of boots sat by the door. The mine did not stop. The smoke still rose. At your own doorstep, your mother was bent over the fire. She looked up as you entered, her brow furrowed. "Service?" she asked. You nodded. She didn't press. That evening you sat at the table in silence, eating thin stew with a slice of dry bread. The candle on the mantel sputtered in its holder, casting shadows like ghosts on the far wall. You thought of the girl's doll. You thought of the man with the tea. You thought of fire. When you lay in bed, sleep did not come quickly. You watched the ceiling beam, running your finger along the seam of the blanket, breathing slowly. You wondered if the bell would ring again tomorrow, and if it did, how many would listen? Because in this place, grief was not a river wide and loud and weeping. It was a fog, soft, slow, and everywhere. He was coughing more now. Not the short, sharp hacks of a cold or the breathless wheeze after lifting coal, but deep, dragging coughs that seemed to tear at him from the inside. You could hear it echoing down the shaft long before you saw him, a sound like crumpling parchment soaked in tar. Jonah stood at the entrance of the lower tunnel, hand braced against the timber frame, his lamp held low. The skin beneath his eyes had gone grey, and his lips were cracked from breathing air that never healed. But still he came. He always came. He wrapped the chain around his waist slowly, as though the metal weighed more than it ever had. You offered to help with the cart, and for the first time he didn't wave you off. Instead he nodded once, and together you pulled the heavy wood and iron frame down the track, the wheels complaining with every turn. It was a quiet shift. The mine had grown more somber since the fire. Fewer jokes, fewer songs. Even the overseers seemed subdued. You passed other boys in the tunnel, their faces hollowed out, their lanterns dim. No one looked up. At the break you sat together in the airshaft corner, the same place he'd once handed you water, the same place he'd once spoken of his sister beneath the yew tree. Today, he spoke again. "I had a dog once," he said, unwrapping a sliver of cheese from cloth. "Brown and white, ears too big for his head. Used to follow me through the moor, even when I tried to lose him." You smiled. "What happened?" He shrugged. "Sold him. Coal wages didn't feed two mouths." He chewed slowly as though the memory filled him more than the food. "I used to run, he added. "Before all this, could make it across the meadow near old McKinley's farm in less than a minute." You tried to picture it, Jonah sprinting, hair flying behind him, wind in his lungs, laughter somewhere behind his ribs. It was hard to see. He turned to you then. "If I don't come up one day," he began, then paused. "Look after Thomas, will you? He's still soft. Needs someone who knows when to keep quiet." You didn't answer. You only nodded. You worked the rest of the shift beside him. Slower now, more careful. He stopped often to lean against the wall, pulling air into his lungs like it was being rationed. At the end of the day, as the whistle blew and men began filing back toward the cage lift, Jonah lingered. "You go on ahead," he said, voice hoarse. "I'll close up here. Just need a moment." You hesitated. He smiled, faint, crooked. "I'll be right behind." You climbed the shaft, one hand trailing along the beam. The evening air outside tasted of coal smoke and rain. You scanned the crowd as they emerged, one by one. Ellis, Thomas, Rue, but not Jonah. The foreman called names from his clipboard. When he reached Jonah's, he paused, scanned the ledger, scratched something in the margin. "Must have stayed below," someone muttered. By dusk, the cart was still parked at the tunnel mouth. His coat still hung on its peg in the corner of the pit house. You asked if anyone had seen him. One boy thought he'd passed him at the lower level, walking into one of the side shafts. Another swore he'd gone home early, but no one was sure. That night, You passed his bunk on your way to the washroom. The blanket was folded. The boots were gone. You stared at the space for a long time. The next morning, the foreman didn't mention him. The work resumed. And in the mine, absence makes no echo. It only deepens the silence. You returned to your post. You picked up your tools, but something had changed. The mine had taken Jonah, and left no trace behind. The shaft was different this time. Not wider, nor narrower, but deeper, in ways you could not name. The foreman handed you a new tally token that morning, stamped with a different number, and pointed without words toward the far tunnel, beyond the lower seam. It was a place you'd never been, a part of the mine where air moved slower, where walls bled thicker moisture, where the silence pressed tighter around your ribs. You were being moved to the blacker depth. They called it the hollow seam. It was older than most, long left for its difficulty. The coal there ran thin, the rock tighter packed. Few men wanted the shift, but boys didn't have the choice. Your name had risen in the ledger. Jonah's had vanished. You entered the shaft alone. The path curved sharply downward, the supports spaced farther apart, the walls sweating black, the air turned sour, thick with the scent of metal and rot. You wrapped your scarf higher across your mouth. Your lantern flickered with each step, the flame leaning as though it too wanted to turn back. Ellis waited inside. He nodded once, offering no greeting. His face looked unchanged, that same worn bone structure, the same scar across the brow. But something in his eyes was different, tired, yes, but also wary, as if he too was a guest here, not a resident. He said, "Watch your step," then turned away. You followed him down a side shaft barely high enough to crouch through. Here, even the rats moved more slowly. You could hear their claws in the dark, feel the puff of their bodies brushing past your ankles. The walls were close. Your shoulders grazed the beams. The air tasted of ash. Ellis showed you how to brace the ceiling. He pointed to the joists and tapped each one. "This one's good. This one's old. That one, don't lean on it." His fingers were stiff. 3 of them bent at the wrong angles. He didn't ask your name. You didn't offer it. You worked in tandem, digging, hauling, hammering boards into place. Hours passed. Sweat pooled in the hollow of your back. Your throat burned with every breath. Mid-shift, the ceiling creaked. Not loudly, just enough for your blood to still. You looked to Ellis. He paused, placed one hand against the beam, closed his eyes. "Stones shifting," he muttered. He stepped back. So did you. Nothing fell. But the tunnel sighed, long and low, and the smell of sulphur crept up from the floor. The coal was brittle here, brittle and sharp. It broke into shards that bit your hands. The pick vibrated strangely against the walls, as though the rock held memories. Ellis didn't speak again that day, but he stayed close, not watching you, guarding the silence. On your return to the surface, the light from above felt thinner. The sun had begun to set. You climbed the wooden ladder, legs trembling, lungs seared. At the top, you turned to look back and the tunnel seemed smaller than it had hours before, more distant, as though the blacker depth had closed behind you. That night, you lay in your bunk, staring at the beams overhead. The ache in your arms pulsed in rhythm with the lantern flame on the wall. The silence of the shaft returned in memory, not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of something waiting. Ellis's words drifted back to you, stones shifting. You closed your eyes, and in the darkness behind them, the mine breathed, slow and deep and endless. It slips from you in pieces, not all at once, like a candle snuffed in the wind, but gradually, a slow unraveling. At first, it's just the sound of it that fades. Your name, spoken less often, called less frequently, until it becomes something that feels too big in your mouth, a thing unused, a weight without meaning. They don't call you by it anymore. The overseer points and says, "Boy." Ellis grunts and says, "You." Thomas, when he passes you on his way to the upper shaft, nods and says nothing at all. Even your mother, back in the cottage with her cracked hands and tired eyes, speaks your name softer than she once did, like it hurts her teeth to say it aloud. Sometimes she replaces it with love or child, though neither feels true anymore. Not down here, not in the place where names are swallowed by stone. You sit now in the hollow seam with a pick in your hand. your back pressed to a brace beam that smells of sweat and mold, your knees drawn up, waiting for the whistle to call the next shift. And you truly try to recall it. The syllables, the rhythm of it, the way your sister used to sing it through the fields in spring, but all that comes is silence. You whisper it to yourself, hoping your tongue might remember, but your lips feel numb. The sound feels foreign, like a word in someone else's language. Was it James? No. Was it Eli? No. You blink, startled at the sharp ache that fills your chest. Not fear, something else. Loss. You weren't born here, you remind yourself. You were born to sunlight, to water in basins warmed by firelight, to a dog whose name you do remember. Moss, brown with white feet. He used to lick your toes when you sat by the hearth. You remember that, but not your own name. Mine has taken it, not by force, not by malice, but by time. It has worn you down like water wears stone. It has hollowed out your vowels, scraped away your consonants, sanded your voice until only labor remained. They call you Mouse now. A name given by Rue, the boy with the twisted ankle, who watched you slip through the timbers with a quiet step and a gaze that never quite met anyone else's. The name stuck. Mouse, small, silent, unnoticed. You never corrected him. Maybe you never wanted to. Because if you are a mouse, then you are not the boy who came here wide-eyed and trembling. You are not the boy whose fingers once traced the grain of oak trees in summer. You are not the boy whose name was once whispered with love at bedtime. You are something else. Something made of coal and dust and flickering flame. You rest your head against the beam. Above you, the shaft groans softly, its joints creaking like an old man in sleep. The lantern near your boot spits once, then settles. You close your eyes and imagine someone calling you, truly calling you, from above the earth. A voice clear and warm, but nothing comes. Only the sound of shovels in the distance. The echo of Ellis's cough, the familiar hush of the dark pressing in around you. You rise. You lift the pick, and without thinking, without knowing, you whisper the name one last time, that half-forgotten shape of self, into the tunnel. It vanishes before the echo, and, with it, the last thread of who you were. Down here, names do not matter. Only hands. Only breath. Only silence. It happens so slowly you don't even feel it at first. Not in your hands, though they are cracked and stiff now. Joints aching in the cold. Not in your knees, though. The bruises never heal fully, always pressed against stone. It begins in your back, deep beneath the skin, where no one sees. Each day, you bend, just a little more. It's the tunnels. They press down, always down. The ceiling's too low to stand, the beams too narrow to stretch. You crawl, stooped like a beast, hour after hour, until your body forgets how to rise. One morning, you try to stand straight after the shift. You cannot. You feel the tug in your spine. Resistance like a knot too tight to loosen. You push against it. It pulls back. The shape of you has changed. The mine has carved itself into your bones. You walk home with your shoulders hunched, eyes to the ground. A woman in the street glances at you, then away, as though ashamed to see a child already bent like her father. Inside the cottage, your mother watches you limp toward the basin. She says nothing, only passes you the soap, warm from the hearth. Her silence is not unkind. It is weary. She knows what the pit does to the body. She has buried its evidence before. At work the next day, you catch your reflection in a water pan. You barely recognize the shape, the curve of your shoulders, the way your head leans forward as though drawn by a hook. You stare for a long time, not out of vanity, but confusion. Who is that? The boys in your shaft have stopped teasing you. Not out of kindness, out of recognition. They, too, feel the weight. You see it in the way they shift when no one's watching, stretching their backs against the wall, clutching their sides when they think they're alone. You work beside an old miner named Cal now. He is shaped like the tunnel itself, curved, crooked, with arms like knotted rope. His voice is low, slow, as though every word has to crawl its way up from his lungs. "Used to be tall," he mutters one day, pressing a beam into place. "Walked straight as a line, I did." You nod. He glances at you, then chuckles, a rasping, dry thing. "You'll be lucky to get there." "Where?" 40. You don't respond. Instead, you press the wedge beneath the brace, feeling the crack in the wood as it tightens. Your hands are steady now, steady and strong, but they no longer feel like yours. Later, during the break, Cal shows you the leather strap he wears under his coat, wrapped tight around his middle, tied with wire, holds the ribs together. You look away. That night, your dreams are full of ladders that never end. Endless rungs stretching upward into light, but your back is too bent to climb them. You try again and again, but your body won't lift. You cry out in the dream, but no one answers. When you wake, your pillow is wet. You sit up slowly, wincing as your spine crackles. In the corner, your boots lean against the wall, like two empty lungs. You put them on. You go to work. You do not stretch anymore. There is no point, because the mind has shaped you now. It has bent you into its image, the way water bends wood, quietly, permanently. And you have learned at last what it means to grow down, instead of up. They found you on your side in the shaft, curled like a worm beneath the bracing beam. You don't remember falling, only the spinning. The world had tilted too quickly, the air too thin. One moment you were lifting the pick, the next you were on the ground, your breath scraping at your throat, your fingers numb. Ellis shouted your name, not Mouse this time, not boy, but your real name. Or close enough. It felt strange, unfamiliar, like a garment you hadn't worn in years. Someone lifted you under the arms. Another wiped your face with a damp rag. You heard voices floating above you, too loud, too far. Leave him. No. Get him up. Christ, he's gone white. The shaft blurred around you, a smear of lantern glow and boot heels, then a sharp scent. Vinegar, maybe. Something bitter. The world snapped back. You vomited. They carried you to the lift. The cage groaned as it rose, wood creaking beneath your weight, and the hands that held you. When the air changed, you felt it in your teeth, the cold wind against your cheeks, the brightness, the wrongness of it all. They laid you on a bench in the pit office. Someone fetched your mother. Someone fetched the doctor. He came. Of course he came. He always did. When someone collapsed. Not out of care. Out of form. His boots clacked across the stone floor. His coat was pressed. His mustache perfectly curled. You knew him by scent before sight. Tobacco and starch and something powdered. He leaned over you with cold fingers, pressed them to your wrist, to your neck, to your ribs. You winced as he tapped your chest. Breathe in. You did. Pain bloomed like frostbite behind your sternum. He straightened, pulled a notebook from his coat, and scribbled something quickly. He's strong, he said. Just hungry. Overworked, maybe. He'll rest today. Back at it tomorrow. Your mother's face, weary, drawn, didn't change. She stood beside the bench, arms folded, lips pressed white. You couldn't see her eyes, only her hands, trembling at her sides. She didn't speak. Neither did you, because what was there to say? That your lungs felt scorched, scraped clean with every breath, that your vision blurred when you sat up, that you woke each morning unsure if your heart would keep its rhythm. He didn't ask. The overseer nodded at the doctor's words and marked a note in the ledger. Strong, he echoed. The doctor tipped his hat and left. Back in the cottage, your mother stripped your shirt, washed your chest with warm cloths, muttering under her breath. You thought you caught your name but couldn't be sure. Later, she fed you broth. You drank it slowly, each swallow catching like splinters in your throat. You tried to sleep, but the ache in your chest beat against your ribs like a trapped bird. In the night, you woke gasping, the air too thick, the world too heavy. Your fingers clawed at the blanket. Your skin prickled with sweat. She came then, sat beside you, stroked your hair with a hand that smelled of coal soap and onions. She didn't hum. She didn't cry. She only whispered, "You don't have to be strong, just breathe." But you didn't answer. Because down here, strength isn't something you feel. It's something they decide for you. And the doctor, with his notebook and his polished boots, had decided you were strong. And in the morning, the whistle blew, and you rose, and you followed it, because the mind does not wait for the weak. And you have learned to pretend. You do not remember falling asleep, only waking. And when you wake, you are not in the mine. You are not under the weight of timbers, or the damp breath of the shaft. You are not coughing, not hunched, not aching. You are standing in an orchard, The sun is bright, not fierce, but warm, like the memory of an embrace. It pours through the leaves above in golden threads. The trees sway gently, their branches heavy with fruit, the air thick with the scent of ripeness and earth. You breathe in deeply, easily, and your lungs do not protest. No dust, no iron, just air. Sweet, clean air. Beneath your bare feet, the grass is soft, alive. You walk slowly between the rows, brushing your fingers along the bark. The apples are red, deep and shining, and when you pluck one from the bough, it feels cool in your hand. You take a bite, the juice runs down your chin. You laugh, out loud. The sound startles you, light and round, like a song you'd forgotten. Somewhere in the distance someone calls your name, your real name. You turn, it's your sister, the one buried beneath the yew tree. Her dress is white, her hair is braided. She runs toward you barefoot, the way she used to, arms open, her voice clear. You reach for her, and then the light changes, flickers, like flame starved of oil. The orchard dims. The trees darken. The wind grows still. You blink. She's gone. So is the fruit. So is the grass. You are cold. You wake. You are not in the orchard. You are on the stone floor of the pit house, your back against the wall, the shift bell echoing in your ears. Your lips are dry. Your body aches. You sit up slowly, feeling the stiffness in your spine, the tremble in your legs. Your ribs still pull with each breath. Rue sits across from you, gnawing at a piece of bread. He doesn't look up. The dream clings to you like cobwebs. You dress for your shift, the smell of apples still lingering in your nostrils, the sunlight still warm on your face. But when you step into the shaft, the light is gone. The tunnel yawns open, cold and endless. You return to your station, pick in hand, the tunnel pressing in around you. But something is different. Not the mine. It remains what it has always been. It's you. You carry something now, a sliver of warmth, a memory too stubborn to be crushed. That orchard, it was not real, but it was yours. And down here in the dark, dreams are a kind of rebellion. They cannot be taxed. They cannot be chained. You strike the coal with your pick, and each swing rings with rhythm. And though no one can see it, though no one would believe it, behind your soot-streaked eyes, you are still beneath the trees, still breathing orchard air, still hearing your name. It was the boots you noticed first. They were clean, far too clean. No coal dust on the leather, no cracked heels, no scuffs from cart rails or stone. They stood out like pale bones in a pile of ash. And above them, pressed trousers, a long wool coat, and a stiff hat that looked as though it had never known a Yorkshire wind. The man wore a pair of spectacles that glinted whenever his head turned. And he carried a book, not the kind made for prayer or poetry, but a ledger, thick and lined. A silver pen dangled from a string tied around his coat, but he did not belong here. He walked slowly through the yard beside the shaft entrance, eyes darting from the winch tower to the narrow rows of cottages. He didn't speak, not at first. Just children froze mid-step. Men tipped their heads, eyes wary. The overseer met him with a half-bow, his cap pulled low. They exchanged a few words, clicked, quick, not meant for others to hear. You stood nearby, your shovel limp in your hand, trying not to be seen. But the man from London turned toward you. He did not smile. "Your name?" he asked. You hesitated, swallowed. "Mouse," you said softly, unsure if that was still true. He frowned. "No, your real name." You didn't answer. He crouched slightly, as though trying to see something in your eyes. "Age?" You mumbled the number. "Job?" "Trapper." He scribbled in his book. You watched the ink spread across the page like coal dust in water. "How many hours a day?" 12. "Sometimes more." He nodded, then pointed at your hands. "Have they bled?" You blinked. "Yeah." He pointed at your chest. "Do you cough?" You nodded. "And the others?" "All of them." He scribbled again. The overseer shifted behind him, arms folded tight. "They're healthy," he said sharply. "Tough. Yorkshire lads." The man didn't respond, only walked on. He entered the shaft briefly, just past the mouth. Not deep, just enough to feel the weight of the air, the cling of stone on skin. He returned in minutes, brushing dust from his lapel as though it offended him. Then he called the boys together, you, Rue, Thomas, and a few others, lined you up like cattle, measured your height, asked about your food, your sleep, your lungs. He did not listen closely to the answers, only watched your faces. Before he left, he turned to the foreman. Parliament will want a report, he said, and reform. Eventually, the word was strange on his lips, heavy with promise, but hollow at its centre. Reform. You'd heard it before. It sounded like hope, but it moved like smoke. As the man climbed into his carriage, children ran alongside, calling after him, waving. He did not wave back. The wheels turned, the dust settled, and the mine breathed on. The next morning, nothing had changed. The shift bell rang. The carts groaned. The overseer's strap hung in its usual place. You took your pick. You descended. And as you passed the shaft mouth, you glanced at the place where the man from London had stood. Boots spotless, pen gleaming. Already, it felt like a dream. A different kind of dream. The kind you don't wake from. Because change, you had learned, is slower than coal. And the mine does not care for Parliament. The rain had delayed the shift. Not by much. An hour, maybe two. But long enough for the carts to stop their groaning. For the pit yard to empty of clatter. The men huddled in the engine house, drinking weak tea from blackened tin. You sat on the hillside above the shaft, knees drawn up, watching the clouds drag their grey bellies over the moor. The colliery was quieter than you had ever seen it. No smoke from the chimneys, no voices from the yard. Even the wind seemed softer, as though the earth had taken a breath and forgotten to release it. You watched the sky. It had been years since you'd really done that. Looked up and simply stared. It was not the bright storybook blue you had dreamed of. It was pale, slate-coloured, streaked with streaks of mist and ash. But it was open, wide, alive. You lay back in the grass, hands behind your head, the cold soaking through your shirt. The blades tickled your ears. Water dripped from your fringe into your eyes. But you didn't move. Above you, the clouds shifted, slow giants drifting towards some distant place you could not name. You imagined yourself floating with them. You were 13 now. Your back curved like the tunnel beams. Your lungs still rasped in the cold. Your fingers bore the memory of the pick, even when empty. But something stirred beneath your ribs. Something that had not stirred in a long time. You stood. You turned your back to the shaft, to the smoke-black mouth of the mine, to the path you had walked every day for half your life. And you climbed. Not far, just to the top of the hill, the one that overlooked the pit head, and the rows of cottages below. The grass there grew taller, wilder, a few trees bent in the wind, their leaves shivering. You sat beneath the largest one, your coat pulled tight around your chest, and you breathed, truly breathed. For a long while, you didn't think about coal, or dust, or names lost in the dark. You listened instead to the wind in the branches, to the bleating of a lamb in the far pasture, to the whistle of a kettle rising faintly from the cottage windows below. You remembered a time before the shaft, before the soot, when you were just a boy with knees full of mud and a mouth full of questions. And though you could not recall all the answers, the questions began to return. Who am I? What was my name? Where does the sun sleep? The mine still called. You could feel it behind you, not with noise, but with gravity. A pull, a weight. But you did not rise. You did not descend. You stayed beneath the tree, the roots curled under you, the sky drifting above, and for once you were not a miner, not a body in the dark, not a voice swallowed by stone. You were a boy, sitting in the wind, watching the clouds, and breathing. As the last coal dust settles and the wind quiets on this lonely hill, I thank you for walking this path with me. If this journey touched something quiet inside you, I invite you to return, to light another candle, and step again into the echoes of forgotten lives. Subscribe if you wish to keep wandering. What part of this story will stay with you long after the mine grows silent? As the last lamp fades and the mine doors close behind you, I hope this story leaves a trace of candlelight in your soul. If these voices touched you, return again, and together we'll walk through more forgotten rooms of history, hand in hand with those the world tried to leave in shadow. Could you have lived a life without sunlight? What part of this journey stayed with you the most? Do you think you would have found the strength to climb out? If you could whisper something to that child in the tunnel, what would it be?